But for now, I want to bring you up to speed on what's the latest from the business world. And there's an interesting conversation my colleague Peter Akaba is set to have from our city centre studios. Over to you, Akaba.
Indeed, thank you very much, Abiagina, out there on Mombasa Road. Of course, we are coming to you live from our city centre studios here at the I&M Bank building, right in the city centre, to continue the conversation around what exactly is happening, but this time in relations to the economy. Of course, the conversation today being around the Kenya we want. Of course, that process at the Supreme Court being part of the conversation, but essentially what has been the effect on the economy, what is the genesis of this and what will be the way forward. We, of course, will be touching base with my colleague Murimi Mwangi, who is at the Supreme Court itself later on in the bulletin, to be able to bring you up to speed on what exactly has been going on, to bring you some commentary and analysis. But for now, I want to introduce my guest here in studio. She is Emma Miller. She is the president of the Architectural Association of Kenya, a person who is versed in what we call the built environment, the environment around you, be it housing, real estate, and various other aspects of life around you. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much, Peter.
Now, let's get straight to the crux of the point here today. We want to talk about the Kenya that we want, essentially. Well, most people would think that this essentially has a political angle to it. We are talking about the built environment.
Yes.
And the association has a several-point plan, 5-point plan, I think.
6-point.
6-point plan.
Yes,
Talk to us about it.
Yes, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with KTN.
Karibu sana.
Changing the narrative about Kenya. And as an association, we thought we must be proactive. We cannot only be coming to the fore when things go wrong, when buildings collapse and the like, and said, as a council, we came together and thought, what do we need to do to change the narrative of Kenya? And we identified 6 things. Number one, of course, which all Kenyans really feel, is affordable housing. Yes. Housing has become extremely expensive and out of reach for majority of Kenyans. We find that about 60% of urban dwellers live in informal settlements and slums. So about only 40% are really, living in a place that you'd call a good neighborhood. And even then, a very small percentage are able to own homes or even qualify for mortgages.
Let's talk about a bit about that before you go to the other points. The fact that almost, 54 years after independence, Kenya looking at a population of about 50 million, about, give or take 23 million households, depending on who you ask, and just 22,000 mortgages across the entire economy from inception. Yes. This is really strange.
Yes, indeed it is. But there are different thoughts to that, whether we should be trying to aim at home ownership or having people just live in decent housing, and there are different ways of that. Of course, we have borrowing a very British way of doing things, which was geared towards home ownership, which is almost sentimental, that someone wants a roof over their head. It's cultural. But you find the German example. 99.9% of people, percent of people rent throughout their lives.
So who owns the houses?
Well, different corporations, pension schemes, and the like. So a different model. But for us, beyond even that, because you find the number of people who can actually qualify for mortgages are very few. But we're also looking at aspect of those 60% who are living in informal settlements and slums would not qualify for mortgages either way. So there must be a way of providing social housing. We did it in the past throughout the 70s, 60s and 70s. County government, like Eastlands and the like, Jerusalem and all those were houses meant for people. It was at a subsidized rent. And or, for example, the NHC, National Housing Corporation, would put up housing estates like Madaraka, that were not necessarily profit-driven. It was not about profit, because it's partly government's role, whether through its various parastatals and arms, whether it is through the devolved government, provided housing for the poor. Right now, we've left it to private sector entirely. Private sector is driven by profit and not necessarily by social goals. So what has happened is that a lot of private developers are cutting corners for them to be able to make their return on investment, they maximize their profits. And that's when you've seen the advent, when actually you saw government sort of take a backseat in terms of provision of housing is when you've seen private developers coming in to cater for that cadre,
yes.
and they're taking a lot of corners, and that's why you see from 1996 onwards, before that we never had talk of collapsing buildings.
Yes.
From 1996 onwards is when we're starting to see that, because people are taking cutting corners, yes, as private developers. Yeah.
And let's talk a bit about one aspect of this, that is national savings. A lot of the things we've said would be done because either the pension funds have people who've saved over a long period of time, or in funds from insurance companies.
Yes, yes.
We, as Kenyans, don't save that much. How do we cure this culture?
Well, in terms of, first of all, the culture maybe of saving and the like, I think that is a discussion that is about the public actually being sensitized. Yes. What's the value of putting something aside? Even whatever meager income you have, what's the value of putting something aside for later? And I think that is something that Kenyans must be educated of. But it'll be very hard for me to save if I'm living hand to mouth, which is what is the case with the majority of Kenyans. It's very hard for me to try and even consider buying a house if I can't even put food on the table for my children tomorrow, or even today for that matter. Yes.
Okay, let's go to the second point.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No problem. Yes. I think the other thing that on number 2 on our list is an accessible, clean public space. Nairobi was known for a green city in the sun.
Yes.
I do not think that is the case now. We have a lot of development coming up. We're almost becoming a concrete jungle. We're supposed to have at least 25% of our city space being green space that is accessible, clean, and safe for everybody. Yes. And we don't see that. We've not seen any park come up in the city from independence. Yes. So other than the Uhuru Park, City Park, that were there at Independence, yes, there are no new parks that are being put up, no new public spaces. Planning, as it were, is in place for certain green space and all, but implementation of this has not been very effective. So as the Architectural Association of Kenya, we're advocating with county government, with the national government, to ensure, even as the National Spatial Plan, which was launched earlier this year, is in effect, that we implement things that we plan for. Because a lot of these things are actually there on paper. Yes. We cannot talk enough about green space for our children to play. You find now more and more schools are have very limited space for children. Yes. Going almost vertical, especially the new schools that have come up, because space is becoming a constraint. Yes. So children have nowhere to play, not at home, not in school. Yes. So we must make a very concerted effort to ensure there's space.
This is a problem that is prevalent in not just Nairobi, but also in various other places across the country. Yes.